we're back. Joe Lagalante and Big Friend over here. I apologize for the technical difficulties and the partial expletive at the end of part one of this discussion on John Durham Peters' Marvelous Clouds, Chapter 7, God and Google. I experienced a bunch of difficulties trying to upload and record this video yesterday, so I'm just going to do them in two parts. And here's part two. To conclude our conversation of the universe as a library, I just wanted to bring up this question posed by John Durham Peters. And he states, what would happen if some plague killed all humans but left all material objects untouched? I found this really reminiscent of our conversations earlier in the semester regarding John Mann's The Trouble with Pictures and the ways in which these ancient civilizations had these ways of, like drawing pictures. I'm thinking of like ancient Egypt and hieroglyphics or like cave paintings and things like that. And these were obviously understood at the time by the civilizations and cultures that were interacting with them. However, flash forward in time, we're still human beings, but we don't have, the rubric to understand and decode these messages now. So we're kind of left guessing at best. So, really begs to ponder on what will happen when inevitably, our current language systems no longer are accessible to civilizations and cultures in the future, or even more pertaining to what Durham Peters is discussing here, what happens when all of the ways in which we archive digitally these ideas and you know um, works of art and literature and things like that are just no longer accessible in the future. He discusses the way in which his dissertation is like locked on a floppy disk that's just basically lost. And he thanks Old Faithful Paper for the fact that physical copies of his dissertation do still exist in one or two libraries, but let's say those words can't be read anymore. Now the dissertation will truly be lost. So, I mean, it's just something really interesting to think about, the ways in which our languages and our means of communication and of accessing information are always changing. So while we may feel that our modes that we engage with now are permanent, the truth of the matter simply is that they're most likely not. I want to get into his discussion on Google as religious medium as well. He states that Sergey Brin famously suggested that the perfect search engine would be the mind of God, and I'm pretty sure that we can all agree that Google is, at least currently, the perfect search engine. It's its own verb now. Because of how effective it is. So nobody's saying, oh, you should Yahoo that, right? He also discusses this thought that religious media is not an oxymoron because of all the ways in which different media have been expressed, like through religious contexts, and much of the media that we interact with on our phones like can be traced back to different religions and stuff, like calendars and epistles and stuff like that. He also discusses God and Google's omniscience, which is really interesting to think about because most ideas of deities involve the fact that they're all seeing, all knowing. And Google is that. It's tracking every single thing that's searched on its engines. Every website we visit, it's logged and it's stored in their servers. Now, what exactly they can do with that breadth of information, I don't fully grasp, and I don't know if they even do necessarily, but it is interesting to think about Google as this all-seeing being, right? Because it's watching everyone interact with it, and everyone is interacting with it. Also, he discusses the ways in which Google's design and aesthetics are purposefully meant to be, like that of religious connotation. He discusses the primary colors of the logo, and the pristine white background, which could be reminiscent of either, like a cloud or heaven, or just even like the thought of something new, like opening a brand new Word document and you have this, perfect white page with nothing on it. It's kind of like an infinite number of possibilities what you can turn that into. And again, whenever you're discussing infinity, some sort of idea about, deities must enter that conversation, right? Um, yeah, he also talks about the ways in which Google tries to remain kind of like whimsical, or I guess more down to earth, playful even. And he discusses, the whole doodle activity that they engage in. When they'll put these fun little animations that are like doodle drawings, that have some sort of context with, what happened in history on this day, or um, if they're honoring like someone in particular. Like I believe he said that they did one of these doodles for Borges, um, and the Library of Babel. I just wanted to kind of wrap this up, discussing, the ways in which he talks about cosmic storage, and the fact that there's like this um, constant recorded record of, the universe, and all of its goings on. It kind of made me think of Saint Peter at the pearly gates, with his book. And there again is that religious tie, right? The same way in which Google is logging, literally logging, all of our interactions with it. And okay, sorry for the interruption. That was more of a familial glitch than a technical one, but I think that I was talking about Charles Babbage and his concept of total cosmic storage, the ways in which Google kind of mirrors this idea. Durham Peters also brings up Thomas Hill, who stated that the universe always witnesses your deeds, and very much in the same kind of line of reasoning, Google always witnesses your searches and your web browsing activity, right? Um, let's see. The last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on here was this idea that our cosmos has the possibility of irreversible wreckage, but also radical novelty. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read straight from Durham Peters now. He states, a world in which omniscience has cloudy patches would be one in which not everything is spelled out in advance, noise is audible, and our choices have real consequences. A pluralistic universe in which there is such a thing as irreparable loss. That is the universe I think we live in, one full of risk and danger. Single choices can have eternal consequences. Angels can fall to everlasting doom. A single act can wreck a life of goodness. Our cosmos has the possibility of irreversible wreckage, but also of radical novelty, of an innovation so complete that the past is completely transformed or even forgotten. Erasure is both damage and salvation. And I think that last idea is something like really incredible and profound to think about. Erasure is both damage and salvation. Kind of reminiscent of his earlier arguments about how knowledge is, just as much the act of forgetting as it is that of retaining information, right? Um, and a little further down the page, he says, at some level of magnification in some medium, clues and traces are left for the investigator. Hackers can find the ghosts of your deleted files somewhere in your computer's innards. The genuine feat would be to alter history so that no trace was left anywhere. Atonement makes the past reversible and erases the indelible ink. Okay, so now I just kind of want to break this down a little bit. First, this whole idea that we live in a universe that has real consequences to our choices, and that it has this possibility of irreversible wreckage is something that I just personally have been reflecting on since I've read it. Um, our choices do matter, and our digital choices do as well. The internet is forever is a saying for a very important reason. Um, it's something that I think we need to impart on the younger generation as much as possible. Like, if you say it online, it exists and it always will. Um, you can try to erase it, but you're never going to scrub it completely clean. And like how he points out that hackers will always be able to dissect the innards of your computer to pull apart these breadcrumbs left behind of the things you want to hide is really, I'd say, important to take away. Especially, and to always remember when you're interacting in these digital spaces. But it also kind of contradicts what he had earlier said, about what happens when these means are no longer accessible. So even if they do still exist, but we're unable to access them, like let's say computer technology is totally outdated in 700 years from now. If someone were to find this laptop, they wouldn't be able to access this video or understand it or interpret it necessarily. So even if something exists, these breadcrumbs, for instance, do they leave an impact or do they have any significance whatsoever? That, I think, is a question left a little unanswered by Durham Peters, and one that I'd like to think about further. So, thanks for joining me, big friend. I hope that you learned something today, and we'll see you tomorrow for video response 3. All right, thanks. Have a good one.